So are we ready to start?
We're ready to go.
Okay, well thank you for coming here and listening to whatever it is that the Spirit leads this conversation in. Perhaps I should start by asking you some of the questions that you'd like to put on there, and I'll see if I can address them, perhaps. Okay.
Is there, I found reading the Daily Examiner very disturbing yesterday about Cootes Crossing.
Yes.
And I'm wondering whether there is a good storybook that actually encompasses a lot of these stories altogether in this region. Or whether it's yet to be
No.
yet to be written.
Yes. No, thank you for that. I do not know if there is a storybook as such, but I know in some of our language books we have stories of particular things that happened, and that is one of the like the story of Cootes Crossing. Like there's massacre sites all over the Clarence Valley here, and so when we're looking at collecting stories, so how can we do that and share it like with the church to listen, to hear the stories? Because a lot of people, so that would be Nimboida, isn't it? Cootes Crossing out that way. Yeah. So is that the South Grafton parish looks after that?
Yes, but yes, I think so. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I hope that sort of like there'd be an opportunity for the centres to come together, like because as I said earlier, I'm from the Maclean area, the Yagle area, that when you're working with your people, you know, you work with wherever they are, so you go with them. And one of the things that, like in this river theology that we're looking at doing here, riverland theology, because I find that a lot of the people do not understand why we call the land Mother Earth. And so they think that we are honouring the land instead of honouring God. That so we want to break down some of those myths. And so like this is how we see the land. It is vital to all peoples, not only to us, but to all peoples. And whichever country or land that you come from, they've all got different aspects of that land story. Like we hear the Palestinian story, what is happening over there. In the year 2008, our bishop took us, Thea and I, we were privileged to go with him when he took us on to see the Palestine of Jesus. And that was a 2 weeks course, and so these were groups of newly ordinants. And so as I journeyed there and went and met the people and listened to where the scriptures were read, or were written rather, and it just when I came back after being there for that time, I couldn't, had to come back and write a story about how it affected us, and I couldn't really write about the story there because I saw my people in the Palestinian story and the dispossession of land that they too have. And I saw sort of like where they were in reconciliation. They were like 70 years behind us as a people here in Australia, and because of what we were doing and the stories that were handed down from my parents, my mother and sort of like the other elders that we'd grew up with, I heard that how they were treated, but as we moved on, we weren't really treated like that. We moved on from there in a way. That when I was over in Jerusalem at St George's College there, I saw like the Palestinians would come in to work, go to work, and they couldn't cross over certain areas unless they had their ID. And that really affected me because I took that as, I saw rather the dog collar that they had for our people, how we weren't allowed to go into pubs and things. Like I'm talking about when my father came back from war and that in that era when they came back and they couldn't go into any of these places, and even though sort of like they fought with each other and they worked together. So I saw that, like the injustices there, and then I saw, I guess it's for me when I was in sort of like talking to these beautiful people over there. So your heart just went out to the injustices that you're seeing by like Israel, the Jews being the oppressors on the minority, you know, the indigenous peoples of that land. And so I very much sort of like saw that story. And when up at the Mount of Olives and seeing, sort of like looking down and seeing all those boxes that we saw there, like these, where the bodies, and it was just a very, very powerful image of, you know, these bones, them bones, them dry bones, you know, in Ezekiel. And so with this river of learning that I'm hoping to be doing with you, is to try and work out how can we, like, what does reconciliation mean to you and to me? You know, what does it mean? It may mean different things to each one of us. We'd all have a story of what reconciliation means. So I think it's, for me, it's, I've got to get to know you before I can, you know, I've got to hear your story. We've got to talk to each other. We cannot assume that we know what the other person is doing or what that group of people are doing. And so I've been in the Anglican Church now about 30 years, and in 1988, here in the Grafton Diocese, we had this beautiful Bishop Schultz. He wrote, one of his charges was that there were 5,000 people, Aboriginal people in this diocese. So we've got to work with them, do not forget them. And so like I'll have to do an update on see how many Aboriginal people now are living in this diocese, and bring the church with me to meet my people, and so that we can truly sort of like be reconciled, pardon me, to the different language groups that from Upper Tweed heads right down through to Port Macquarie. And so I think that we have an amazing time that we together, with like-minded people, whoever would like to be in this journey to come with us, as I've said back there, building this bridge together. We are all builders of this bridge, okay? But unless we allow God to lead us, and that was the vision that he showed me when I was praying about this weekend and what to talk about. And it was about this bridge, and it was this rainbow bridge, just like that rainbow cross that I saw in that vision so many years ago. And it wasn't this wooden cross, it was a jewelled cross. And so now this bridge is going to be a jewelled bridge, okay? Because that's bringing the rainbow colours. You know, as Desmond Tutu from Africa, you know, this amazing man said that we are the rainbow children of God. And so when I look around that and you see, like the world, we come from all different races, don't we? Different language groups, different races, and but we all have something to bring of ourselves to this place. And so I hope that, you know, you guys would, whoever would like to come with us, and so I'll be speaking with Greg, and Gail doesn't know this yet because I haven't been able to speak with her, but I spoke with Bishop Sarah about this big river or riverland theology. I've spoken to Bishop Sarah, but I haven't had the opportunity to speak to Gail. And so hopefully that there will be a time, Greg, that, you know, you can organise something.
Yeah. I could say a little bit about an update on that for you as well, if you like. Yes. The way we operate here, we're both the parish of Grafton, but we're also the cathedral. Yes. And we have parish council, but we also have chapter. And well, a few weeks ago now, we had a really good day in this room as chapter. We were looking at, so what does the chapter do, which is not parish?
No.
What does the chapter do, which is diocese-wide? And one of the things, because I'd spoken with Bishop Sarah and Gail was here for the meeting, was to say, well, I haven't caught up with Lenore yet, but I understand that Lenore is working on a big river theology project, and one of the possibilities is for the cathedral, not as in Grafton, but as in diocese, for the cathedral to be kind of your base for some of that, because it's bigger than the city of Grafton. It's bigger than Clarence Valley. It's the whole diocese we're talking about. So Chapter was very keen that when the time came, we start that conversation with you.
Yes.
So.
Oh, well, that's exciting then,
Yeah.
Greg.
So the ball has started to move.
Yeah. So I better catch up to this ball.
Well, I can't go any further without you, but the ball is not stuck anymore.
But I guess firstly, it's like, I don't know, in the Grafton Diocese, if you have a reconciliation action plan.
I don't think we do.
Yeah, well, perhaps that might be the way to start. Start with something. And I was just with the health department, the primary health network, from the same as region as the diocese, and they were starting on their reconciliation action plan. And so it was like the education, they've got theirs, and so now the church have to catch up with the outside world and see what's going on there. But I think like with everything else, like we ourselves have got to be reconciled to who we are, and we cannot move forward unless, for example, like I know that there are so many things, like as a mother, as a grandmother, you know, you're going through your own everyday things with your family, and so sometimes, you know, you think, oh, what am I doing here? Lord, I'm a priest, but I must be the worst priest here because I can't even keep my family in control. That so it's a daily thing that I think that we have to do. And once we acknowledge, like we as family members, we all have our own issues to deal with, and then we have the community issues to deal with. And sometimes when you're working out in the community is very diverse. Aboriginals are very diverse people. It's just like the church. So we are the church, aren't we? All together, we are the church, this very diverse, whatever shape and form it takes, that it is very, very broad. That it's also, once you start listening, you can hear like the richness of each person when you speak to them. You know, where do you come from? Where are your grandparents from? And then when people start telling their stories, and they're bringing their stories, whether they're refugees, and they're bringing your story, and you're hearing their story. And I think until we can listen to the other, that is when we can move forward as a church. And my little granddaughter, she tells me, Nanny Nornor, have you got your listening ears on? Because she's going to read me a story. She's 3, so she'll go click, click. And so I've got to have my listening ears on to hear her. And so I think that the more I listen to people, the more I become aware of the Jesus story. The more I become of this amazing love that this man, what he did for all of us, not only for the Christians, you know, not only for me here or in Grafton or wherever, but he did it for the world, for all peoples. And so he, through God, you know, he's done that reconciliation bit. And so it's up to us now. The deeper our relationship is with my relationship grows with Jesus, the more I realise I can see a lot more clearly, because I know the person that I am following. And as a priest now, I've got to be accountable at the end of time to be, you know, what I do in my role as a priest. If I make a mistake, that's when I have to get down on my knees again and ask God to forgive me. But I think it's like I must remember that I am human too, and I make mistakes. So I'm not one of the God is divine. So I'm down here, so I've got to realise that I am fully human. And so that is sort of like one of my hopes, Greg, is this, that like with the chapter or all these other bodies that we have, that we can sit down together and work out how can we do this together. And when we meet with the chapter, bringing like the other, my other Aboriginal friends with me, the people with me, to come from all the other different language groups. So as I started talking earlier about this in 1988, when the Bishop Schultz, he had this gathering here in the cathedral, and with the clergy, all the clergy were here, and they invited the Aboriginal people to come to this meeting, this gathering. And I wasn't really in the church. I might have just had one little finger or toe in the church, because I saw my Aunt Della's and Mum and them, they were the more mature Christians. I was the one who just come along, because they invited me. And it was Father Mark Lavelle who was Jesus to me when he came to visit me in the hospital. And he told me about this meeting that he was having with Mum and Aunt Della and them about coming to this meeting here in Grafton. And so at the time when I was in hospital, I was having these severe panic attacks. So if any of you have had panic attacks, you know what it's like. So you don't really know what people are saying to you, because you're just concentrating on sort of like one little point, trying to bring your mind back together. And so when I did come up here with Mum and Aunt Della and the other elders, we came and we met over in where the school is now. We met over there, and we listened. There was Fred Wanbaker, who was the Anglican priest, and he was the justice person for the Anglican Church of Australia. So he was there, and then there was this, and he was a Uniting Church minister from Nungalinya College in Darwin. So he came, he was there as guest speakers. And then there were some other sisters, I think, from the church, they came. And then Father Doyle, the Catholic priest, he came. And so it was that time when we were listening to each other, when the clergy were listening, and where the Aboriginal people were able to tell their stories. And so I'd like this diocese to revisit, if we could have something, so it's 30 years this year. So if there's a possibility of trying to get something like this back here in Grafton again, or whether it be in Grafton. But I think it's important, sort of like, because I know parts of the Yagle story, but there are many others in the other stories about their land and the river, how they, and it's, when you're looking, it's like parables. It's Jesus when he talks to us through the parables. So all these what we call Dreamtime stories, they are like parables, because as I said earlier, that the holy dreaming of the first peoples of this ancient land came through that ancient wisdom and knowledge given to the people by God. And so when you look at where these stories are coming from, like they are stories that a lot of them haven't been written. They were passed down to us. And so now we're looking for material that has been given to us. So now we are trying to bring that, Roger, into the book form, so that we realise as the elders are passing on, their stories are going with them. So we now have sort of like this beautiful young man, Dean, and my daughter Frances, and all these other young people who are coming up and gathering and collecting those stories. And because they've moved on from where we were down here, and now they're up there, our kids are up there in universities, receiving the education. So now they're not afraid to speak out.
Stop there and just make the comment that when I went to school, I'm 77, and I finished school in 1956. And from the time I was 10, I had a dear friend who's passed and whose funeral I helped organise, but I wasn't around to take with Lenore. She and her 3 sisters came to school in Casino, or would have been anywhere, only because our parents did not object. So people of my age, to have got an education, had such a battle, and at the end of 1956 she could not come to Teachers College with us. And even 2 years later, another girl could not come to Teachers College with us, and that was the government's law. So these people are really starting from a long way back, yes. Lenore, and I'm so proud of how you've come and how, well, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say.
Go on, say it. Margot.
Dr. Margot Weir's name, but yes. Like she battled that and through Victoria managed to go on. Yep. But anyway, sorry to have interrupted, but I wanted to put that in.
Thank you, Thea. Because in reality, that's what, like when I went to school, we were taught about our history lessons were about Captain Cook and how the British came here. So a lot of my friends, when we have school reunions and we start, they'll ask us to talk, say something, and then when you start sharing the stories of what happened, like with the stolen generation, and they said, Lenore, why weren't we told this? And then I met about 2 to 3 months ago this gentleman who was my age, around 70. He came back because he grew up not knowing the Aboriginal people. And then when his father was a doctor, and so this Charles, he's also a doctor now, but at the age of 70, he came back because he realised what he'd done when, how he felt when the headmaster made him sit next to an Aboriginal young girl, and how he felt. And so he saw the NITV with the story of Frances and her artwork, and he said, talking about Yakel country, and he said, that's an Allagundi Island, the island where we grew up. And he said, I never heard these stories. And so he came back from up at Sunshine Coast. He called in and knocked at the door, and Frances welcomed him to her home. And then I said, oh, Charles, welcome. And I just took him in my arms, and you could see the emotion. He was deeply touched because he came because he knew that what he had felt in that classroom about sitting next to this Aboriginal girl was not right. And so as a Christian, he realised then that how could he had to know more. He wanted to know more about the Aboriginal story. He wanted to know more about the history of this land. And so when we're looking, I think sort of like sometimes there's a lot of deception and lies that we have been told, like through the historians and history, the books and things like that. So I think sort of like before we can move on as becoming truly the Australian Church, we have to acknowledge the injustices of the past. We have to be honest and faithful, like to each other, but also more so to God. Because if we truly believe, in who we are as in the Anglican Church, and this Anglican Church is so broad, it is so broad, and it is so rich. The heritage of the Anglican Church, it is so rich, and that's what drew me to this church. Well, it didn't draw me, I was brought in. It was the Spirit who brought me into the church here in, the Maclean Anglican Church. Because I grew up on an island in Maclean, Allagundi Island, and it was that little island that I now call the sacred heartbeat of the Yakel people. Because from this place, this is where our stories were passed on to us and given to us by these old people And I'm now one of the old people that is giving the stories on to the younger people. So I've got to, you know, I've got to sort of like really become sort of like, you know, a person of integrity and honesty and truth, and looking at the injustices of the past. So how can we rectify this? You know, I can't do it by myself. I can do it with a group of others who would like to come and be with us, Greg. And that's what I'd love to. So I thank God for bringing you here, Greg. When I got your email, I think about Australia Day, and I saw you there, the challenge that you put out. And I think I might have cried because I thought, thank you, God, for bringing someone here who understands the plight of the peoples here. And so you have so much, you know, that I would want to learn from you, and together that we can learn from each other. And so I think I'll stop there now for a bit. And is there any questions?
Thank you. I think we will have a question. Let me just add one more story to go alongside this. So I was born in Bundjalung country in Lismore, but I'm not a Bundjalung man, of course, but I was born in Bundjalung country. And in fact, it's only now, listening to you, I've just realised I don't think there was a single Aboriginal kid in my schooling. So I went through East Lismore, Lismore Heights, Richmond River High. I don't remember ever having a classmate, a student in my class who wasn't white. If they were a little bit unusual, they might have been Italian, but they weren't Aboriginal.
No.
You know, it was like, that was diversity, to have an Italian in the class. But to have anyone else in the class, Aboriginal, that was like, no, they were at Kabui, and I, actually to my shame, I don't know what they did for school.
Well, we were the unseen people, the hidden people, and like my mother, my parents went to, they had on the Alagundi Island, there was a school and a church, and the kids weren't allowed to go to the mainstream school. And it wasn't until I started school that I started going to the mainstream school. So the stories that I heard from my mother and my aunts and that uncles about that time on the island, and what was it, like the teacher there, how he had no expectation of what these children doing, because they were the gardeners, they were the house cleaners. So he would take them over to his place to do the housework, and he would teach the boys how to do the gardening. So Mum and all the other elders who I speak to now, you will hear these stories, Greg, and that's why I think it is so right that these stories are brought out to share, so that you can really see, you know, at Kabui, at Tuncester, and all these other hidden places, Cabbage Tree Island, right around the diocese, all these little pockets where there was schools for Aboriginal people. And it wasn't until, as I said, sort of like when I went to school, that was when the doors were open in the mainstream thing, through the government of the day. So I think there is I don't think, I know, there is a lot of stories, but I think now is the right time. You know, sometimes we go on time and say, this should have been done long time ago, this should have been done. But it doesn't happen like that, does it? Like the faith of our people, of my family, my people in Yaegel country, the faith of my people, they were the ones that grounded us. And so it was the people from the church, they were lay people, just like you and I. They were lay people who would come to the island to feed us and nurture us, you know, about Jesus and about God. And I can't remember them talking about the Holy Spirit at that time, but I think for me it was like growing up, knowing that I was built on this firm foundation where God was right at the centre. And then when I listened to other people who grew up in other areas here, they didn't have that same experience. That God, you know, that church was, or faith was the backbone for them. And so I think that now is the time to start collecting these stories, because I know, like when I look, I'm ageing, and my aunts, my cousins, and they are now becoming the elders, like the next elders in line, and so I'm the next one up from that, or down from that, you know, so I know that I have a duty to tell these stories, and so I hope that we can do something, Greg, together, and how we do it, I don't know, but I know you go to Baryugal, and so...
Well, we don't anymore. We stopped going there sometime last year, I believe.
Oh, okay.
But maybe that's a conversation to have as well.
Yeah. Because the other day we had this river of learning at McLean.
When we went to Baryugal 10 years ago, it was all white.
Yeah. But now I saw one of my nieces from Baryugal, because I was a nurse before this life. I was a nurse and I a community health nurse for Aboriginal health, and so from Baryugal, South Grafton, McLean and Yamba, that was my territory, and so I'd go there as the nurse, and then when I retired from that as a nurse, and then now when I go back with either my daughter or with Beres, my sister, to go and meet with the community, you're still seen as that nurse, that person. But last Wednesday down at McLean High School, when we had this river of learning, this young lady come to me, said, "Oh, Aunt, could you please pray for me and pray for my family?" And I said to her, "Would you like the church to come to you?" She said, "Yes, please." And so there's another thing. So how do we, you know, build on what she was asking? And so I think sort of like sometimes we miss these little opportunities because we're too busy. We're too busy racing around, and we're only listening, half listening. We're not listening with our ears properly. But I think it's there's a wonderful opportunity. Yeah, click them on. That's right, Rob.
So other questions perhaps? People got particular questions you'd like to raise with Lenore?
I don't have a question, I've got a comment, which I think is fantastic. That CDAS this year, in the secondary school, the languages being offered are local indigenous languages. There are no European languages offered in the secondary school this year, which I think is a great thing. So I just wanted to share that. I don't know if people realise that's happening at CDAS.
That's wonderful. And what does language mean to you? What does it mean to me? As starting to learn that there was a language, the Yagal language, that we started to come to know. And it just, so our young kids knew we went to Sydney University and did a weekend, intensive language weekend, and there was a mixture of the old and our kids with us, and they came, and at the end of that session, this weekend session, these young kids were there, and there they were writing in language, singing in language, writing their stories in language. So Emma Donovan, she was in that group, and that's where she first learnt her Gumbaynggirr language. So language makes us strong. It makes us know who we are, and it is so important to know who you are, your identity. Because if you don't have your identity, you know, we're just like that empty, aren't we? Empty vessel, because we leave all our beautiful like the riches of our heritage behind with us. So we have to bring our heritage with us. Yeah, so I think that's all I can say, Robbie, for
Lenore,
right.
sorry, you're still commenting on things. So,
Yes, there.
Norpa, 4 years ago, started collecting some of the stories of the Bundjalung people, and this year they've started producing they've worked on them for that length of time, and they're producing them as Norpa shows at Lismore City Hall. And one's already been this year, talking about, is it the Seven Sisters, the rivers of the coast.
And when you hear these stories, like we have different names for, you know how we have, like with God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So they have, all these language groups have different words for them. And so now, when you speak in sort of like, as I did this morning, like with Magandaya, you know, and so you're in a way demystifying the faith or the spirituality of who we are as a people. Yeah, because a lot of, you know, there's so much, and I know that you want more, but I think sort of like, is it time for me to wind up, Greg?
We're good for another 20 minutes or so if people have questions.
Truly.
Yeah. We're not getting out that easily.
You're telling me I only have this.
That was in the church.
Yes,
we have time. I'm Claire. I grew up in Melbourne, but I've lived here for about 30 years, and I lived at Kangaroo Creek for a long time. And when was the Port Arthur massacre? In the
About 30 years ago, 96, something like that.
On that weekend, my next door neighbour gave me something to read, which was the account of the Thomas Coutts massacre. And that weekend was the weekend of the Port Arthur massacre. And there was a great outpouring of grief for all these people that were sadly killed at Port Arthur. And I'm reading this account of the massacre at Kangaroo Creek, going, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Coutts Crossing, and it was it changed. I've never really thought about Aboriginal people before, but from that day, it really changed what I thought about where I lived and the people, you know. So we tried to get the council to change the name, and they didn't. But it's just come up again this week. It seems to me it's a great opportunity to have a community-wide discussion about the meaning of history and language and stories and names, and you could have a big fight about whose side you're on in changing the name or not, but you could use it as an opportunity to really grow in understanding of us all.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you.
And how can we help?
Yes. No, I think this, and that's why it's sort of like, as I was saying to Greg, I need a lot more of my community with me, so that you're not just listening to my voice, because there are many voices, and I think, you know, now is, as I said, now is the time, because we are mature. This is 2018. We are mature, and so if we're not able to hear, like about Coot, what he did out there, you know, and all these other, where the massacre sites were, like the poisoned, you know, so you don't hear these, because they're undercover, it's all swept, but now the veil, now is the time for the veil to be lifted up, you know, from the earth, from the ground, to really listen to the blood on the tracks, and the river of blood, the stories about, you know, the rivers of blood. One of my friends, Father Vince Doyle, he was a priest at Maclean, and so when he first came to Maclean as the priest, he went up into the bell tower and he asked God to show him why was it that he was here in this place, and immediately had this vision of the bones from the massacres that were in the river. And so it's us, about us telling these stories, bringing these stories now out from under there, like digging soil, getting the ploughshares ready, hey, for the Holy Spirit, you know, to really come and cleanse us, cleanse this land, and so that hopefully that, well, not hopefully, I know that we will together be those little bridges for Jesus, building the bridges. And there was one thing that I wanted to say, but I know that will come in a minute. So just keep on talking. Yes, love. Yes, Kay.
When my youngest daughter Judith was having her 6th birthday, and we're going back about 45 years. Yes, she was having a birthday party at home, and one morning the teacher phoned me up and she said, Mrs. Weir, she said, do you realise that your daughter has invited every student in her class to come to her birthday party? Apparently she got up front and just invited everyone. And I said, no, but that's okay. That's okay. She said, but Mrs. Weir, there's Aboriginal children in that class. I said, that's okay. I said, she's invited everyone comes. And so they did, and they had a wonderful party. And further on down the track, a young Aboriginal woman came into the bookshop and she said, hello, Mrs. Weir. And I said, hello. I said, how do you know I'm Mrs. Weir? She said, because I was in the Jewish class that invited us all to come to her birthday party. And she said, Mrs. Weir, I will never ever forget that, and I will never ever forget you.
I know. Yeah, I know. I just want to sort of like in a way, I guess, conclude by telling you that ever since I had this about 3 years ago, after doing Christingle out at Hillcrest, my community, with these kids, and then I was out there with some of my friends from the, McLean Anglican Church, dressing these kids up and with the candles and that, and then, but after that service, I heard this voice saying, my people will perish without a vision. And so that led me then to speak to the McLean Church when they had their AGM the next January or February, and told them that I was being called into a new mission now, and it wasn't so much with the parish as such, like doing services up there. And I said, I feel that sort of like the Spirit, He's calling us to go further. And so it's sort of like looking at those communities that I nursed through that nursing time. There's going way up to Baryugal, and who knows if we have to go beyond, but there'll be, and this is where, so I don't know, Greg, what it's going to look like. This theology thing, river of learning, or that's what they call it in the school, but this riverland theology that we will be, this mission that we will be on this Grafton diocese, and I'll be taking the Grafton diocese with me, or bringing them with me, and so it will be sort of like, and hopefully like whoever else would like to come and join, sort of like with the, I was thinking, like, I know that you have our Dreamtime story for the river started up at Muli Muli, Woodenbong. That's the falls up there, and then Tabulum. So all these other places where they are like that. We all hold, like all story holders of this river creation story, and so you will hear a different interpretation of the one story. And that's what I came to realise, that like with the scriptures, there are many different translations of the scriptures. And so how do I interpret? What is my interpretation of the scriptures? Like, I guess looking through my eyes, and the more we go on this archaeological dig together of the scriptures, when I go down to, I've been offered to or invited to go to Melbourne to Trinity College, and I go down there for sort of like the part of the first term, and Samuel Dow, who was the chaplain there, and he and Jazz, they invited me to, when Jazz was having her first child, they invited me to go down and be the chaplain, or to assist him in his role as chaplaincy. So when the new kids would come in to the college, and there are 300 kids there, and or young students, I should say, that they all come. And so first of all, you have the orientation. And so in that week before everyone arrived, Samuel had me doing things that, like inviting the kids to come in, and the kids would have to walk through this smoking ceremony. And so because I'm not an elder from that place, so I had to quickly ask Samuel to get an elder to invite me, to meet with me, and allow me to do the things that Samuel was asking me to do. And so it started off with this welcome, and then so like 100 students for this first year that were coming in at that time, and we had a pot outside the church, the little chapel there. We had a pot with the soil from that area and the gum leaves from that place, and then the smoke, and the kids would have to walk through that smoke. And then as they walked through, I would give them a water blessing. And then once they were all seated in the chapel, then I would tell them that was like their initiation into this new place. And it was like baptism, that's an initiation into this new journey that we're on, you know, and that's the initiation for the men, what they go through. And it's bringing them to this new phase in their life. And so for me to be able to do that with all these students and then start talking about like Aboriginal spirituality and mainly finishing then with the prayer. And so I was privileged to be a part of that. So for 3 years I've been going down there. And whilst I was there, I was going into the theological college, and I just loved going in there and sitting and listening and learning. And so if you ever want to do an archaeological dig of the scriptures and walking through the book of Genesis with Abraham and Sarah, I just found that so exciting. So I don't know, so Greg, you might be able to do something up here with us, you know, because I just found that, for me, I didn't see Abraham and Sarah. I was looking at my great-grandparents, my grandparents who led us in that community, like on the island and at Ashby, and they were the men and women of faith. So I saw them in that story. And then as they moved on, I could see then all the other people who were there, who were part of this collective story. And then when we moved back to the island when I was about 8, we moved back there after a big flood. And so there was a flood in the book of Genesis. And so it was all, I thought, this is my story here. And so, you know, it just gave me this new thing of, like, the stories, it is a part of our lives, everyday lives, you know, that we live in communities, and we all know what floods are, you know, and we've had that experience. And then when I went into the New Testament, sort of like with John, looking at the Gospel of John, and I just saw myself there in that story, the story of my people again, because that was how we lived, like as Jesus told us to, you know, sharing and caring for each other. So I just came away so rich, you know, so rich from those times that I go down there. So as I take the gift of Maclean and the parish of Maclean with me, then I come back with this wonderful gift that I have to share with others. Yeah, so no, I really enjoyed that.
Wouldn't it be good if we could make this also a physical journey? I mean, you talk about the communities of Wollongong and Erdenville and all that, to actually physically walk this journey in stages and have like a sort of pilgrim way down the Clarence from top to bottom, so that you could, and you don't have to do it in one go, you can do it, and actually joining communities up and spending nights talking about their stories and eating with them. It's just suddenly something that just popped into my mind.
And taking like the message stick with us. Oh, Roger, thank you, Holy Spirit, for showing us. Wow. I think I don't need to say anything more now.
thank you for starting the conversation. It's not going to be the end of a conversation by any means.
No, it's just the start.
And it's interesting that you started towards the end, you're using the metaphor of excavating the scriptures and so on. Which what you were just saying before, when you were talking about sort of digging into Abraham and to John and so on. Because next week's Dean's Forum actually has the title Excavating the Lord's Prayer, with that idea that I want us to focus on the Lord's Prayer as one of our most sacred texts, but to dig into it a bit and kind of excavate it and see the fact that there were actually 3 ancient versions of the Lord's Prayer from the 1st century, and in fact none of them are the one we use in church, but never mind. But you can see how it's morphed over the period of time. And then the following week is Synod, so we've got enough going on without a Dean's Forum. But the final Sunday in June, again, goes back to where you started. We're going to be looking at prospects for justice and reconciliation and peace in the Holy Land, talking about Palestinians and Israelis, which is one of my passions, of course. So I was interested in the convergence between the way you were approaching things and your own deep empathy for the Palestinian people in their difficult circumstances. So the conversation has been happening for a while, but I'm glad that our conversation has now started. And thank you for being here this morning. And there'll be more things happening. We just don't know yet what it's going to look like or whatever. But there is a journey of reconciliation and finding our place in this land. I'll just finish with one kind of funny, hopefully funny personal story. For years I've been teased about my olive skin and brown eyes, and once upon a time I had curly dark brown hair. And various friends that are indigenous have sort of commented that I must be one of them. So I decided last year to have my DNA test done to try and discover that I was in fact part of the Bundjalung people from Lismore. I'm 99.9% Irish and English. I'm as boring Anglo as you can be, and the 0.01% is from Palestine. So there you go. So how that bit got there, we've probably all got that in our DNA mix. But despite all that sense of, well, maybe I am indigenous, no, I'm as white as they come. I just happen to have olive skin and brown eyes, dark curly hair. So there you go. So it's wonderful to have you with us, both in the liturgy and also for this time afterwards. To be sitting where I was and sort of watching watching how you operated there together at the altar was a wonderful blessing, and I'm sure it was a blessing for all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. No, thank you, Greg, and thank you all for coming over here to get another dose.
Yeah, and we can take our dose with us and tell other kids.